I'm going to start by embarrassing her. My first year here, Shari was my friend that Temple Beth Am dangled in front of me. Like, come to Beth Am, be a rabbi here, you'll have a friend. And so Shari is still one of my closest friends, and in my first year here, she was so excited to announce to the staff and to our board that she was pregnant. She was so happy, and like a good Jewish girl, she waited 12 weeks to tell everybody. Unfortunately, a couple weeks later, the tests came back, and she found out that she was a carrier of a Jewish genetic disease, Tay-Sachs. And then her husband got tested, and they found out he was as well. And then the fetus was tested, and it was positive. And so Shari, after having told everyone, had to make the hard decision to terminate her pregnancy. Tay-Sachs, if you don't know, is one of the many Jewish genetic diseases that we are so blessed to carry. Unfortunately, it is very painful if a child actually is born alive. It experiences pain until it dies very young. At that point, Shari was able to terminate her pregnancy here in Florida. She would not be able to do that today. We're going to hear a lot of stories this evening, not just my dear friends. But I'm not up here to tell you stories. I'm up here because I'm a rabbi. And I wanted to tell you that abortion is not just a personal issue, it is a religious issue. And as Jews, we look to Torah and we look to Talmud to figure out how we are supposed to walk through the world. In the Torah, in Exodus 22, there is a story of two men who are fighting one another, and one pushes the other, knocks into a woman, and she miscarries. And the Torah says that if the woman miscarries, then the person who caused her to miscarry has to pay a fine. But if they injure the woman, then it is eye for eye, tooth for tooth, life for life. So we see already in the Torah that yes, a fetus has value, but it is not the same as a life. It is not the same as the woman who is carrying the fetus. In the Talmud, the rabbis say that up till 40 days of gestation, the fetus is mere water. And after that, it's considered as if it's a limb of the body of the woman. It goes so far as to say that if a woman is convicted of a capital crime and is therefore subject to the death penalty, that you do not wait for her to give birth. It's only when the head has emerged that the fetus is now considered a child and a life. Before that, the woman's life always takes precedent. Our rabbis knew that sometimes abortion is healthcare. They also didn't put the responsibility of bearing children upon women. One of my favorite stories from the Talmud is Judith, this woman who dresses up in a costume because she's had painful births and has had terrible pregnancies. So she dresses up to stand in front of the rabbi, who of course is her husband. That's why she's in the costume, so he won't recognize her. And she says, "Is a woman obligated to be fruitful and multiply?" And he says no. And she goes and she drinks a cup of roots, making her infertile. It is not our job to have babies. It is a joy and a privilege, and something that I know from my friends and from being a rabbi is that often to have healthy pregnancies, we need the option of having abortions. I care so much about this topic. So often the religious voice we hear is a very narrow voice on the Christian far right, which makes me so happy that we have Catholics for Choice partnering with us this evening. And by the way, a whole interfaith alliance with a lot of churches who are represented. My faith is the reason that I am up here. My faith also is one of storytelling. Jews love to tell stories. And we are so lucky to have as a member of our congregation, Andrea Askowitz. And I listen to Andrea Askowitz and Allison Langer on their podcast, Writing Class Radio, every week. And so I reached out to them and asked them to bring the magic that they do every week of helping people to tell their stories to the hub. And they did. And I want to just thank them and thank all of you for being here. And I hope that all of you being here means you're going to vote yes on 4, and you're going to get all of your friends to vote yes on 4. So it's my pleasure to, that's your cue, come on up. All right, so Allison Langer and Andrea Askowitz.
Thank you. Is this on?
No.
Doesn't feel on. No. I have to turn it on?
You can use mine.
Oh, no. Oh, that one? But wait. Oh, but then they're going to need one.
But I can turn this on.
Oh, she knows. Okay. She works here. Rabbi Greengrass, thank you so much. Wow.
Thank you.
I just feel so lucky to be part of this congregation, to have Rabbi Greengrass among us. She is always speaking out. I've known her for years, and she always speaks for the underdog, even when it's uncomfortable. Thank you so much. She actually already told us how we got involved, but I'll just say that 2 months ago, Rabbi Greengrass called me and she said, Andrea, we need to do a show with abortion stories, and that's why we're here.
So some of my friends and people who know me have heard this story a gazillion times, so please bear with me. But I came to writing at a pretty difficult time in my life. I decided, well, maybe it's time for a writing class, start trying to figure out what's going on, maybe try to work out some shit. We love to say that on our podcast, work out our sheet. But I didn't know Andrea. I just heard an advertisement for a class. I went, and I was like, oh, dear. She kept giving us prompts, very personal, awful prompts, like, what's your biggest mistake? And I just wrote about my dog. I was like, oh, I don't know, I fed him the wrong food, I don't know. The next prompt, what was it?
Most embarrassing moment?
I had a lot of those. Anyway, I wrote about my dog over and over and over, and finally she was like, you need to get vulnerable. And I didn't want to get vulnerable. I didn't want anyone to know my secrets or anything I was suffering from or dealing with or anything. I didn't want to be seen as weak. But she said, you have until the end of the semester.
I could tell she was a good writer and that she was avoiding something. And I said, write the thing you don't want to write about. And that was her assignment. And she came through.
So on the last class, I stood up in front of the whole class, and I told the story of losing my 16-month-old daughter to a congenital heart defect. And it was brutal. We were all in tears. It was terrible. And I thought I would be so embarrassed afterwards, and I just would never want to see these people again. But what it did is it brought me closer to those people. It really did. They wanted to hear more. They wanted to share their stories with me. And it brought out stories in them. And so it also helped me heal. By telling my story, I was able to heal a little bit and start moving forward with my life. And it hasn't been the same since.
We're here tonight because Florida has a near total abortion ban. But in November, we have the opportunity to bring reproductive freedom back to Floridians. "33 years ago, I rode my bicycle across the country for reproductive rights. Back then, we were talking about abortion rights, gay rights, end of AIDS. And I will tell you, in the 33 years, I have seen so much progress. I am now legally married to my wife. People always love that. AIDS is now a livable disease, and the reason why is because people affected by AIDS and queer people have come out and told their stories. Reproductive rights, on the other hand, has taken major backslides in the last 33 years. And it's because we have been afraid to tell our stories, but not anymore. I want you all to silence your phones. I got to thank a bunch of people before we get started. This will go fast, but when you hear your name, I want you to stand up. This is the only group activity portion of the night. But this could not have happened without the volunteers, all of these volunteers' help. Mary Ann Lucas. Sorry, there's a lot, so let's applaud later. But Mary Ann, I want you to stand up. Maria Perez, Jane Gold, Judy Ratson, Jeff Agron, Mindy Aguirre, Aaron Boss-Lund, and all the Men for Choice ushers. Michelle Iger, Victoria Spudua, Pam Lear, Anna Hokammer, my brother, head usher Anthony Askowitz, and my mom, Bonnie Askowitz. And I'm sure I'm forgetting so many people. There's one volunteer who, stay standing. There's one volunteer who's like, hey, what about me? Okay, there's one person who made this show happen for the last 2 months. Poor thing, had to talk to me every single day, several times more than she wanted to, Allison too. But I'm talking about Caroline Miller. Caroline, thank you so much for making this happen. I want to thank all the justice, stay standing. I want to thank all the justice champions who gave $500 to make this happen. Please stand, you know who you are, your name is on the program. And now I want to thank the 19 organizations who have put their name on this effort and gave $1,000. We have RAC Florida, the Worker Circle, NCJW, Tikkun Alum, Sisterhood, Women of Reformed Judaism, Coral Gables United Church of Christ, Women's Emergency Network, Temple Beth Temple Judea, Florida Women's Freedom Coalition, Catholics for Choice, All Angels Episcopal Church. Please stand up, please. There's more! Florida Alliance of Planned Parenthood affiliates, Books and Books, Men for Choice, Equal Justice Society, the Women's Fund, and Cuban American Women Supporting Democracy. This is what it took to make this show happen, and this is what it's going to take to win Yes on 4, this much effort. I also want to thank the people here, and I know there are people here because I browbeated you into coming, who might not be totally on board with this cause. And I want to thank you so much for being open-minded. Mostly, I want to thank our storytellers, because it's one thing to tell your story. Your story is art, and that is so hard to do on its own. But what these storytellers are about to do is bring out their some of them, their most vulnerable moments. And it took a lot of trust. And I just want to thank the storytellers and thank you for being here to hear them. But thank you guys back there for trusting.
I don't get to talk a lot, but I get to talk now.
Hit it.
Liz Shafari is our first storyteller tonight. Liz is a retired law librarian and lawyer. We asked Liz, why she wrote this story. And she said, I wrote this story because it feels right to talk about this experience that I've kept private most of my life. Here's Liz Shafari with her story, Then and Now, and Back to Then.
I am 73 years old. I have had 2 abortions, one in 1970 when I was 19, and one in 1997 when I was 45. I have never told the story of my abortions. I always thought that if I ever shared a true story about my life, it would be something humorous or with an ironic twist. Like when I learned to love living in the tropics after I killed a scorpion with a Dr. Scholl's sandal. Or when I ditched school to go to Greenwich Village to buy Fred Braun's, the remarkably ugly shoe that was the trademark of suburban 1960s would-be hippies. Most of my true stories have something to do with shoes. But fair warning, there is nothing funny or ironic about my abortion story. What is significant about this story is how radically different the two experiences were. In 1970, before Roe v. Wade, I was a freshman in college. I was smart, but only in the bookish sense. I clearly was not smart enough to know that withdrawal is a prayer, not a method of contraception. By the time I suspected I was pregnant, I was home for the summer in Westchester County, New York. I did not want to have a baby. I started making phone calls to doctors, to Planned Parenthood, to the recently formed National Organization for Women. I asked where I could go to get an abortion. I could not get straight answers. Now let's talk about my mother. I loved her, of course. She was your typical Jewish mother, smart but very, very opinionated, and very, very out of date when it came to sex. She believed a girl getting pregnant out of wedlock was justification for suicide. Yes, she actually said that to me. So clearly I could not go to my mother for help. My boyfriend found an older male OBGYN who was willing to help us. The doctor explained that New York State was fairly liberal and that he could perform a legal abortion in a hospital if I had 2 psychiatrists attest that my mental health would be in jeopardy if the pregnancy were not terminated. He gave me the names of 2 psychiatrists. He also explained that if I wanted to go this route without a parent's consent, I would have to be 21. So yes, indeed, I was 21, and so was my boyfriend. Yes, indeed. Lying did not come easy to me, but I was willing to tell whatever story was necessary. The next hurdle was money. We needed to come up with enough money for the doctor, the hospital, and the 2 psychiatrists. It was something like $400, a huge sum to us. To put it in perspective, in 1970, $400 was a year's tuition at a public university. We phoned our friends asking for money. Not everyone was cool with abortions, so we had to be careful who we asked. It was like an underground GoFundMe. Ultimately, we managed to raise the money. With cash in hand, my boyfriend and I took the train into Manhattan. I had after-hours appointments with 2 psychiatrists who clearly were part of a network helping girls secure legal abortions. Each appointment took about 10 minutes. I was asked what I would do if I could not terminate the pregnancy. I knew enough to say that I might kill myself. When asked how, I said I'd throw myself in front of a subway. This was New York, after all. To get an abortion in 1970, before anyone I knew admitted to going to therapy, and when talking about mental health was even more taboo than talking about abortion, I had to proclaim I was mentally ill. The next day, I scheduled the abortion at Harlem Hospital. My boyfriend had a job, so my closest girlfriend drove me to the train station. But beyond that, I was on my own. I arrived at Grand Central Station in a blinding thunderstorm and could not get a taxi. I have never felt so alone before or since. I arrived at the hospital soaking wet. Assorted nurses came by for the pre-surgery preparations. I was shocked when a nurse shaved my pubic hair. This was the Woodstock era, and women were more protective of their private gardens. I have very little memory of the surgery. I do remember that when I checked out of the hospital, the desk seemed confused by my need to pay in cash. I felt weak and crampy, and I knew I was spotting as I left the hospital, but I also felt enormous relief. So, I managed to end my pregnancy safely and legally. In fairness to my boyfriend, he told me later that he should have been there and always regretted that he wasn't. As a result of our experience, he became an enthusiastic pro-choice spokesman. As for my mother, she ultimately found out because the anesthesiologist sent an invoice to our home, despite my specific instructions not to. She held up a condom to my face and said, "Don't you know what this is, you dumbcuff?" Our relationship never really recovered. I never spoke about the abortion. I felt shame and worried that I would never be able to get pregnant again, something I'm sure my mother instilled in me. Many years later, when I had difficulty getting pregnant, I told my fertility doctor. He gently told me that I could let go of that notion. The relief was profound. I did, in fact, have a beautiful baby boy in 1986. Jump ahead to 1997. I was 45. My then husband and I were going through a divorce, and I was seeing another man. My partner had no children and had reason to believe he was sterile. I was already going through perimenopause, and with my history of infertility, we felt perfectly safe not using contraception. Big, big mistake. I already had a family and a full life. Plus, my soon-to-be ex-husband had hired a pit bull divorce lawyer, and I feared what would happen if this lawyer knew that I had become pregnant before the divorce was final. Would he try to have sole custody of our son given to my ex? Would it affect alimony and child support? I decided the best course of action would be to terminate the pregnancy. The abortion I had was very different from the other one, and this part of my story is blessedly short. I lived in Miami. Abortion was legal and easy to arrange. Money was not an issue this time, and I was not ashamed. I called my feminist friend Bonnie, who knew exactly what I should do and where I should go. She made the appointment, came with me to the procedure, and held my hand. It wasn't a happy occasion, but it wasn't a shameful secret that I had to carry for 50 years. As for my ex, he fired his nasty divorce lawyer, and we hammered out our own divorce settlement. We shared custody of our son, and my ex and I are still close friends. There is, of course, a moral at the intersection of my two stories, and I will not insult you by explaining it. Thank you.
Mom, you are the coolest. Thank you, Mom. Okay.
All right, our next storyteller is Nicole Crooks. Nicole is committed to Black women's well-being and building community. When we asked Nicole why she writes, she said, "Writing is often the space where God speaks loudest to and through me." Please welcome Nicole Crooks with her story, "The Shade of Our Grandmother's Trees."
At 27, I was a single mom of two boys, ages 6 and 7, reclaiming my power, therapy, yoga, journaling, meditation, prayer, lots of prayer. I was healing. So many choices had been driven by feelings of not enoughness, guilt, embarrassment, shame. I was taking a deep look at my patterns and course correcting in ways that honored the still small voice within. When I pray and get quiet, God whispers. a divine guidance. Some call it their gut or intuition. I call it God. And when I listen, I know the answers to whatever the question or situation. I survived 11 years of childhood sexual abuse by my older cousin, starting when I was 5 and ending on my 16th birthday. That day I decided not one more day. I fought to reclaim myself, and all I felt had been taken from me. It was my own rite of passage, a reclamation of my body, power, and life. I met the father of my boys during my freshman year of college. We were both way too immature to be in a relationship with each other, let alone anybody's parent. And despite all of the signs, I clung to the idea of creating a fairy tale family. Even put my own raggedy $99 ring on layaway at Service Merchandise. I never paid it off, thank God. Whew. Our relationship was more like a series of Jerry Springer melodramas than a fairy tale. The final blow came when I found him in our bed with another woman, and I was devastated. But gratefully, it became another catalyst for me to reclaim my power. My greatest gifts from that relationship are my beautiful sons and the seeds that were planted to help create the woman I am today. In 2001, at 27, I had my dream job as a resident director at SUNY Albany. Go Danes. Decent salary, great benefits, and a free 2-bedroom apartment for my sons and me. I no longer had to pretend we were camping when the electricity was turned off. I was so happy. I felt powerful and confident, like I was living and working in my purpose and finally reaping the fruits of my commitment to myself. That was also the year the date rape drug became an epidemic. People would drop an undetectable drug they called GHB into an unsuspecting victim's drink and take advantage of them. And this was all new to us. It was very scary. And in that first semester, about 15 women told me they had been raped. I assured them that they were not to blame, and I would say things like, no one has a right to do anything to your body without your consent, or I don't care if at the last minute you changed your mind and said, I don't want to do this, that's final. No is no. I felt like my past pain finally had a purpose. This job became my ministry, and I encouraged each woman to report her rape. Even still, very few did. Around this time, I met someone who seemed really gentlemanly. We went on a few dates, and I really liked and felt safe with him. One night after putting my boys to bed, I invited him over to watch a movie in the living room, and as things got escalated, I said no. I knew I wasn't ready, but he didn't stop. I struggled but remained quiet. I didn't want to wake my boys. I could not have them walk in on that. As he left, he said, if you didn't want it, you wouldn't have invited me here. And his words strangled me. I questioned everything, especially my judgment. How could I have put my boys at risk like that? I felt ashamed and irresponsible. I questioned every decision that led to that moment. And I felt all of the things that my students used to say to me. I really just wanted the pain to go away and have my joy and sovereignty back. A few weeks later, I learned I was pregnant, and when I asked him to take responsibility for the cost of the termination, he said, oh, that's what you do? You kill babies now? I was torn. Part of me thought maybe I should continue the pregnancy. My oldest son was 7 at the time, and one day we were at the Champion outlet when he picked out a baby girl outfit, cute, and he said, this is for my baby sister. I was stunned. There's no way he could have known. The due date was calculated to be my best friend's birthday. She'd passed away 4 years earlier. And I felt like the universe was sending me all of these signs. But I also knew that this pregnancy was a result of a painful rape. My best friend Tyreek helped me see that I needed to make the choice that was right for me. He reminded me that the rape was not my fault and supported me through the entire process. He was my rock. He told me, you have to do what's best for you and the boys, because ultimately it has to be your decision, because you'll be the one who has to deal with the choice. He also begged me to report it. I did not. I got quiet, prayed, and listened for God's voice. Ultimately, I called Planned Parenthood because I knew I wasn't equipped to care for another child, not on my own, especially one conceived through such a violation. The termination and the aftermath was really hard, emotionally and physically, but I'm grateful I had the autonomy to make that decision. Today I have an 18-year-old daughter who was conceived years later under very different circumstances. She's starting her college journey and knows my story. My prayer is that she'll never have to make a choice like this, but the idea that she and other women have lost the right to choose what happens to their own bodies is terrifying to me. There's a quote that inspires me. Blessed are those who plant trees under whose shade they will never sit. I'm grateful for all of our mothers and grandmothers who planted the trees for my generation. And I pray that I will be able to do the same for those generations that follow. Thank you.
So when Andrea and I started this show and started learning about...
I forgot to thank Nicole.
Oh, thank you, Nicole. I get one job. Look it up. But what I was saying is that we started learning... Jesus, you can't see anything now. Okay, this is good. We really started learning a lot about the reproductive rights, the Yes on 4, like what all these abortion laws, like everything that was going on. And I was actually pretty shocked. I had no idea that if you don't report a rape,
That exception is bullshit. Yeah.
exactly. I just want to say that we looked up, we wanted to get the wording so that we could share this with you in the situations of rape and incest. According to the Tallahassee Democrat, if the abortion is needed because of rape, incest, or human trafficking, the law requires a copy of a restraining order, police report, medical record, or other court order or documentation providing evidence. That's not cool.
No, the law is criminal. Because no women report.
No.
And of course they don't. Our next storyteller is Matt Tente. Matt is a screenwriter and portrait photographer. Matt came in from California, where he lives with his wife and a one-year-old son. Matt comes with a perspective about how healthcare could be handled if we in Florida work hard enough to win Yes on 4. When we asked Matt why he writes, he quoted the 27th President William Howard Taft. "I write not to be understood, but so I can't be misunderstood." Please welcome Matt Tente. His story is called Letter to My Son About His Abortion.
Son, one day you will ask us what it was like when you came into this world, and for years we will lie. We will say it was joyful and beautiful and wonderful and all the other fulls we can think of, because the truth won't be easy to tell. How the story began 2 years before you were born, when your mom's obstetrician confirmed she was pregnant. That was 2 days before my 36th birthday, and 1 day before your grandpa, Pop Pop, was diagnosed with terminal cancer. We will fib, skipping over the part about fear, that I was afraid Pop Pop wouldn't live long enough to meet his grandchild. We will wait until you were older to tell you how his diagnosis was overshadowed when a doctor explained the term chromosomal abnormality in the 3 different trisomies: Downs, Edwards, and Patau's, conditions that cause severe and sometimes fatal birth defects. How the doctor presented us with options I was scared to share with Pop Pop because he was raised Catholic in the 60s, which made him pro-life by default. We will tell you white lies until you're grown because we can't share your story without mentioning the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe versus Wade. We will tell you the view from the labor room was beautiful on the day you were born, but nothing about the previous pregnancy 22 months before. We won't talk about genetic screenings and waiting for lab results, or the shock of the genetics counselor telling us that our unborn baby had trisomy 18, Edwards syndrome. That by the time an appointment before an abortion even became available, your mom was 15 weeks and 3 days, well past the 6-week ban that they passed here in Florida. I won't tell you how your mom woke up every morning knowing that if she continued that pregnancy, it was almost certain to end in a miscarriage, stillbirth, or neonatal death. That if it had been taken to term, the resulting complications might have made your conception impossible. I won't tell you that when I explained the situation to Pop Pop, he told us to do what was right for our family. That his words, they came without judgment and were exactly what I needed to hear in that moment. We won't tell you about the rage we felt when Kate Cox, a pregnant mother of 2 in Texas with the same exact diagnosis, had to go to court to request a medical exemption to terminate. How the initial decision was appealed to the state Supreme Court, which ruled against Mrs. Cox, forcing her to flee the state to get the health care she needed. We will tell you how excited we were when we learned that your mom got pregnant again. Not how every single day of your gestation was filled with worry, thinking that it might end like the last. We won't tell you that at 10 weeks, a doctor said you might have a crania, a fatal disorder that would stop your skull from forming, exposing your brain to amniotic fluid that would quickly destroy it. Or how we had to wait 2 agonizing weeks for a follow-up appointment because the doctor said 10 weeks was too early to confirm the diagnosis. How we scheduled another abortion for the day after that follow-up because it would be barbaric to make your mom live 1 more day waiting to lose a pregnancy that was already lost. I won't explain how hard your mom cried at that follow-up when the doctor said the initial reading was imprecise and your skull had formed in the 2 weeks since. And we will certainly wait to tell you how your mom made the call to cancel the appointment that was meant to be your abortion. We won't tell you about Nancy Davis, a pregnant woman in Louisiana who fled the state to get an abortion after receiving a confirmed crania diagnosis. That abortions were banned in Louisiana after the Dobbs decision, compelling Miss Davis to explain to the world that she would have had to carry her baby just to bury her baby. We will wait to tell you how, a few weeks later, your grandma Dub Dub was rushed to the hospital. That your mom, she got on a plane, flew across the country, and raced to be with her. That when I got there a day later, Dub Dub was lying unconscious in a hospital bed with your mom curled up beside her. How your mom's pregnant belly, it was pressed up against Dub Dub's side, and I just sat there watching the 3 of you, hoping Dub Dub could feel you kick, until the nurse said it was time to take her off life support. We won't tell you the joy Dub Dub felt knowing you were on your way, or how hard Pop Pop tried to live long enough to meet you, only to pass away 3 weeks before you were born. We won't explain how heartbreaking it is to become a parent just as you've lost your own. I won't tell you how I tried to calculate the number of years I would have spent in prison for driving your mom to that abortion, or how many more her doctor would have gotten for performing the procedure if we had lived in Texas, Louisiana, or 19 other states, including right here in Florida. We will wait until you're older to teach you about Dobbs and Roe and how to raise your voice when the moment demands it, because women shouldn't have to face this fight on their own. We will wait until you're grown to tell you how fortunate we were to live in California, because if we hadn't, we might not have had you. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. What I wanted to reiterate, if it wasn't already clear, is that 6 weeks is too early to decide whether the baby.
To know the medical diagnosis. 6 weeks is
Exactly.
not long enough.
No, what she said.
Our next storyteller is Nilsa Ada Rivera. Nilsa is a housing analyst and writer. Nilsa and I have been in writing groups together for about 10 years. Nilsa is coming out with her first book in 2025 about affordable housing. When I asked Nilsa why she writes, she said, "I write to explore myself and connect with others." That's exactly what I would have said. Here's Nilsa Ada Rivera with her story, Another Try at a Better Life.
There I was, in a rundown motel on Biscayne Boulevard. It was one of those motels for the 2-hour visit people don't want anyone to know about. Cuban, my 3-year-old son, was eating McDonald's with my boyfriend Marlon. I ran into the bathroom and ripped off the paper that crossed the toilet. I could smell the bleach the cleaning lady had used. At least the bathrooms were clean. I squatted to pee onto the pregnancy test. It took me months to buy the damn test. I noticed I missed my cycle, but whatever. I hadn't been regular. I was 20 years old, homeless, with a toddler, and in love with a drug dealer. Every day, Marlon and I struggled to come up with $65 for the motel. I didn't work. Every bit of money Marlon made went for the room, food, diapers, gas, and some weed. When we didn't have enough money, we stayed at the car, which was a heat trap. We did anything to avoid the car. So I didn't want to take money away for a pregnancy test. I put the test on the sink and waited. I was shaking. I told myself a baby wasn't bad despite our situation. Maybe a baby would make Marlon say yes to that roofing job. The job paid less than what he made on the street, but it was consistent. And I could go to school, get my GED, work as a counselor helping women like me. A baby would push Marlon into getting us an apartment. I didn't want to hear people having sex on the other side of the wall anymore. I wanted a shelf for my son's toys. A baby was my key to a real home. But what if Marlon didn't want a baby? I looked at the test. There were 2 lines. The bathroom spun around me. Fuck. When I was pregnant with my first son, my boyfriend got so mad, he screamed and pushed me around. He wanted me to get an abortion, but I didn't believe in abortion. I was raised Catholic and did not want to go to hell. I had the kid and finally ran away when my boyfriend started hitting my son too. Then I met Marlon, who was part of a gang, but he was good to my son and me. I walked out of the bathroom shaking like a bobblehead. When I told Marlon, he jumped up and down and hugged me so hard he knocked me onto the bed. He screamed, "Yes, we're having a baby." Then he thought he crushed the baby and apologized. He rubbed my stomach, all while roaches scurried around the grocery bags that had our clothes in it, all while drugs were hidden in my son's backpack. We talked about our babies and a new life, all while the blue lights from police cars sipped through the windows. He put a finger over his mouth to tell my toddler to hush, while the police walked around the motel to defuse a fight that had broken out between hookers. I knew I had to go to the doctor for prenatal vitamins. I wasn't eating right. Sometimes I ate a 29-cent burger and nothing else for days. But to get to the doctor, I needed a Medicaid card, which I had not renewed because my renewal letter was sent to my friend's house and I forgot to ask about it. I had also lost our birth certificate and Social Security card without them moving around. New birth certificates cost $40. When I finally got the money, I had to wait for the document to be mailed to my grandfather's house. Then I applied for Medicaid, waited for the Department of Children and Family to review my application, approve it, and mail me the card. All in all, I was almost 5 months pregnant, which is 20 weeks, by the time I saw the OBGYN. When Marlon and I went to the ultrasound, we were so happy. Imagine us in that little ass room with a huge ultrasound machine like the ones in the movies. On the screen, our baby. Next to me, Marlon and my toddler. It was the most normal I had felt in years. The nurse started the exam, then said, "Give me a second, please," and walked out. Then the doctor sent us to Jackson Memorial. After enamel, blood work, ultrasound, and more testing, which took 2 weeks, the doctor said, "The baby's heart isn't developed as it should. If the baby make it through labor, he'll suffer a life of surgery, hospitalization, medication, and special care." Special care sounded expensive and impossible to do from a motel room. The doctor recommended an abortion. I was 22 weeks and had less than 2 weeks to decide. We were both raised in religious families. We didn't want an abortion. Marlon and I cried. We fought. In the end, he admitted I had the last word. It was my body, and if I chose abortion, I would be the one to go to hell. I kept thinking about what kind of life I would give Marlon Jr. Yeah, we named him. Even if I decided to have him and give him up for adoption, what was the likelihood that a baby with such heart problems would be adopted? As much as I wanted a stable life for Kervin and Marlon Jr., that wasn't our reality. Wouldn't it have been more selfish and sinful to bring a newborn to a motel with mold, roaches, or a car we sold crack out of? I decided to go with the abortion. It was the worst experience I have ever been through. I've never met a woman who enjoyed an abortion. Everything about it is painful. After the abortion, Marlon spiraled into depression and got hooked on Xanax. A year later, Marlon and I got arrested. It took me another year to leave Marlon. Then I lived bouncing around between people's houses until I finally got that counseling job, helping women like me, and made enough to rent my own place. That was 27 years ago. Now, I'm a housing analyst. I have a graduate degree. I have a book deal. I'm writing about homelessness. I have 2 adult children, 3 grandbabies I adore, and an amazing, gorgeous, supportive husband who also has a good career. I finally have my real home. I often think of Marlon Jr. I know I made the right decision for him. He would have suffered because of my selfish desires to bring him into a world under those circumstances. I also know I made the right decision for me, though I still struggle. Having Marlon Jr. and my son on the street and doing what I needed to do to survive would have caused me to lose custody of them both. Worse, who's to tell Marlon Jr. would have survived the streets? Still, for years, I felt evil, like I would end up in hell for what I did. But according to the Bible, God gave me the responsibility to choose what's right for me. The Bible doesn't say when God believes life begins. So while I wait for God, the only entity that has the power to judge me, I choose to believe that sometimes the most loving gift a mother can give her child's soul is another try at a better life.
Thank you, Nilsa, for sharing your story. I think I know what people go through. We do not know what people are going through at all. What takes them so long to make a decision? We don't know what takes people so long to make a decision.
No. I want to talk about something that Nilsa alluded to. I learned something really interesting by talking to a woman who's part of Catholics for Choice. And I love Catholics for Choice. And I've always wondered, how do you reconcile the idea that life begins at conception with abortion? And this woman told me, I want to get it right. She said, conscience is our ultimate guide.
It makes sense.
I like it.
I like it too. Oh, me. Sorry.
You want me to go?
No.
All right.
This is my line. All right. The next storyteller is Dr. Cecilia Grande. And Dr. Grande is an OBGYN and has been practicing in Miami for 30 years. When we asked Cecilia why she writes, she said, I only write when I'm asked. So thank you, Anna Hokemer, for asking Cecilia to write her story. Here's Dr. Cecilia Grande with her story called A Physician's Duty.
Good evening. Forgive me, I have a little cold. And I want to thank all these very brave women that are telling their stories today. I grew up in Puerto Rico. When I was 5 and someone asked me what I wanted to be, I said physician. I didn't say doctor. I said it in proper Spanish, médico, physician. That was me at 5. I've been a physician now for 30 years. I practice gynecology here in Miami, and I love it. I want to start by saying pregnancy is not a benign state. Pregnancy is not a disease either, but a lot can go wrong, and the tragedy of the current 6-week abortion ban is that this law prevents doctors like me from doing our jobs. The law delays common sense standard care. Now, doctors have to jump through hoops while women can get sick and even die. A few years ago, before the 6-week ban, I had a patient who was 10 weeks pregnant when she had an incomplete spontaneous abortion, which in lay terms is a miscarriage. She bled so much we had to transfuse her. Her cervix was open, which means she was open to infection and more bleeding. There was no question she would have to go to the operating room for evacuation of the uterus in order to stop the bleeding. By evacuation of the uterus, I mean an abortion. This abortion was the standard of care that saved her life. If my patient came today, her care would be delayed because she still had an embryo inside of her. Today, she would not be transferred immediately to the operating room. First, I would have to document that there was a rupture. Then, because there's cardiac activity, I would have to justify the need to intervene and evacuate her uterus. These are unnecessary delays. This is medical malpractice. Delayed care, in this case, could lead to more bleeding and infection. At best, that causes infertility. At worst, death. Since Florida's ban went into law 2 years ago, I've seen this happen way too many times. In May of this year, with the 6-week ban, the Agency of Healthcare Administration released guidelines allowing for immediate care, by that I mean abortion, for 3 exceptions: ruptured membranes, which means your water breaks; ectopic pregnancies, which means a pregnancy is not in the uterus; and molar pregnancies, which means the patient has an abnormal, aggressive placenta. These guidelines seem humane, but they're grossly inefficient. There are many, many more exceptions that we need. Each clinical scenario is unique and cannot be anticipated. Another exception allows abortion when the mother's life is in danger. This sounds humane, but is very, very gray. Doctors are now forced to wonder, when is my patient's life in danger enough for me to do something about it? The law also gives an exception, as we heard before, for victims of rape and incest. This exception might be the most deceptive. Almost anyone would agree that a woman who has been raped should not have to carry the rapist's child. But the exception, as we heard, requires a court order. Let me explain. Most women don't report rape or come forward fast enough. They go home, they get under their covers because they have been violated. So requiring that these women go through the court system is simply cruel. These guidelines on the surface appear to be reasonable, even kind. But all exceptions, pardon my French, are bullshit. Deborah Dorbert from Lakeland, Florida, could not be here today because of life and work. Deborah was not my patient, but I know her doctor explained to her that her baby would not live long enough after birth. Deborah was 23 weeks pregnant when she found out her fetus had Potter syndrome, which means the fetus did not and would not develop kidneys. Deborah and her husband wanted an abortion. They wanted to end their suffering. But because this happened last year here in Florida, Deborah needed permission from the hospital where she went for care. The law states that an abortion can be granted if 2 physicians certify in writing that the fetus has a fatal abnormality. Let me tell you, in this climate, doctors are afraid. We face penalties of $5,000 and 5 years in prison if we're challenged. Deborah was forced to carry her fetus to term. She went through 12 hours of labor and delivered her baby. 94 minutes later, her baby died in her arms. Recently, I attended an OBGYN conference in Orlando. One of my colleagues turned to me and said, "These are our choices. We can either delay care and wait for patients to get deathly sick. We can force women to go to term, or we can do what we know is right, but face the danger of prosecution." I grew up Catholic, and I know plenty of people who say abortion is murder. Now, this may sound counterintuitive, but safe, legal abortions save lives. Before Roe, the rate of maternal death from illegal abortion was 10%. After Roe, and for the past 51 years, the rate of death from legal abortion is 0. Medically necessary abortions save lives. There are other consequences from this current abortion ban. We've already seen a 25% reduction in applicants for OBGYN residencies in Florida. And good doctors are leaving the state who don't want to practice here under these oppressive laws. And guess who suffers? Every patient who needs gynecological care. That is every woman in the state. In 1994, I graduated from medical school. During the ceremony, while I stood in my toga, I took the Hippocratic Oath, which basically is to respect basic bioethical principles, which are, number 1, respect bodily autonomy. Number 2, non-maleficence, which means we don't create harm. Number 3, beneficence, which means we do whatever we can to benefit the patient. And number 4, justice, which means we treat everybody equally. I'm standing here today because the current law violates every principle of bioethics. I'm Catholic, but I'm a physician, and these 4 pillars of care are my duty. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Cecilia Grande, for sharing your story. It is so, so important to hear stories from doctors who are out there really, in the weeds. Yeah. They're seeing it. They're seeing everything. What I learned is women who need standard care are not getting it, and doctors are fleeing the state. That's scary.
And this is why it takes 100 years to get a gynecological appointment.
Well, my brother, when he was in town, he and I had a knockdown, and it was basically about abortions in general. And what we realized is that neither of us had any idea what we were talking about. So I just want to make sure that you guys go back out into the world understanding what voting yes on 4 actually means. So the amendment states, no law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health as determined by the patient's health caregiver. The second part, because there is a second part, but because an amendment can only address one thing at a time, voting yes on Amendment 4 does not change parental consent at this point.
Our next storyteller is Derek Cook. Derek is a high school football champ, drummer, and guitar player. Because of what Derek's wife went through, Derek has become an activist. He told us he wants to write a book. I hope he does. Please welcome Derek Cook. His story is called We Didn't Give Up.
Good evening. I wasn't being rude, but if you guys could see what I see on my phone, you would be happy. I would like to tell you the story about my wife, Anya Cook, and our miscarriages and what we endured. From the first moment I saw Anya's face, I knew she would be my wife. It only took a year for us to get married, and it wasn't long before Anya told me she was ready to have a baby. I already had a son from my previous marriage, and I wasn't ready to have any more kids. But the more we talked about it, the more excited I got. I still have a video on my phone where my wife is so excited that she was pregnant. But it was only a few weeks before we had a miscarriage. Then we had another miscarriage, and plenty more after that. Despite the heartbreak, we wasn't ready to stop trying. One thing I can say about my wife is she's a warrior. And if you knew who my wife Anya Cook was, personally, you would say the same. But everything she does is calculated. When all of this was happening, Anya took pregnancy tests every day. She took pictures. She took notes. She even tracked down the hormone levels. And yet every time we got pregnant, it ended in a miscarriage. Then we had a special baby. I named this baby Bunny because every morning I would go to work. There was a white bunny running around my front yard, and I didn't know where it came from. So I said, you know what, I'm going to give that baby that my wife is pregnant with a nickname. Bunny was special. She was a fighter, and she was such an active baby. When my wife was 16 weeks with Bunny, we went out to dinner to celebrate. And on our way back to our truck after dinner, Anya felt a drip run down her leg. She said, "Babe, did you throw water on me?" And I said, "No, I did not throw any water on you." She said, "I hope this is not what I think it is." I was saying the same. We ended up going to the emergency room, and we waited for 40 minutes while the amniotic fluid leaked down my wife's leg. And there was a boy, a little boy, who pointed at my wife and asked his mom, "Mom, what is going on with that lady?" And all his mom could say is, "Son, just mind your business." When we had to wait for the doctor, he said, "You're going to lose the baby." And we had to wait 12 to 24 hours before the baby could come out. And he said there's nothing he can do. Then he explained about the 15-week ban that had just gone into effect. I remember thinking, what about your oath? What about helping patients in need? Well, all he could do is apologize and explain that he could not lose his license or go to jail. So my wife didn't get the necessary care that she needed. He then sent us home, and Anya told me she was going to die when the baby died. She just had a bad feeling. Her body wasn't right, but I was in denial. I said, "We're going to get over this." But my wife is very smart. I sure wish I had a brain like my wife. She researched online how to get the amniotic fluid back up. But then it was too late. The next day, Anya asked me to take her to the hair salon. She had a friend that died without getting her hair done. And she didn't want to be a burden on her mother and having her mother deal with that. So I took my wife to the hair salon. And while I was sitting in the truck, she called me from the bathroom and said, "Babe, she's here." I ran into the bathroom and I saw Bunny hanging down from my wife. I told my wife, "Don't look. I will carry that burden for the rest of my life." Sorry. Anya was bleeding a lot. And I separated the baby from my wife, and then she really started bleeding. Then finally, an ambulance showed up and rushed Anya to the hospital. Anya lost nearly half the blood in her body that day on the bathroom floor. The doctor said the operation should take about an hour. It turned into 8 hours. At one point, the doctor asked me if I wanted to focus on saving my wife's life or saving my wife's uterus. And I said to myself, what kind of question is that? But I did choose the right answer, and it was save my wife's life and save my wife's uterus, because I knew it was very important for my wife to have a baby. Me and my wife are very private people. We didn't even want our family to know, because we didn't want to put the burden on them. We'd rather deal with it ourselves. But I realized the burden was too strong for me. So I called her mom, I called her dad, and I called her sisters. I then started to pray after a security officer told me, "You need to go pray." I went into a trance for about an hour of praying. And after I got up, my wife's family and the whole hospital staff was standing behind me. And they all started praying with me. There's a huge difference between hearing about abortion laws and having to live with them. Before this, I can honestly say I never used to think about it too much. I just figured out that it was someone, if they want to do it, that was their choice, and it should be no one else's business. But when that 15-week ban came down, I felt like a lot of you here. I was confused and I was pissed off. And then they turned around and tell us 15 weeks wasn't enough. And now they implemented a 6-week ban. Today I ask myself, how can our government come into our homes and interfere with the choices that we make with our families? When Anya got out of surgery, the doctor said, I don't know what kind of prayers you did, but she's going to be okay. Talking about this, it's never easy, especially when the fact that I lost my daughter. She was the only baby to make it up to 16 weeks. She was the 17th baby out of all those miscarriages my wife had. We lost Bunny in 2022. And I want you guys to know that when I walked on this stage tonight, I didn't know how I was going to deliver this message to you. But I want to make it personal. And I didn't want you guys to think that this is script, because it's not. When I walked on the stage tonight and look at my phone, there's 2 people in my life right now. That's my wife, Anya, and my 9-week-old daughter. And her name is Anea. And her nickname is still Bunny.
Yeah! Woo! Woo! God! Damn! Woo! Oh my God.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you for sharing that story with us. Woo.
Can we get the house lights on? I'm sorry to be so bossy. Again, sorry. I forgot that there was one more portion of this evening that is participatory. So please turn on the lights. Thank you.
Oh.
I want everyone to take out their phones. God, I know it's right. Take out your phones. And you have everybody got a program? No? What?
I have an extra.
What's going on with the ushers? Okay, I want everyone to take out their phones, and if you have a program, please open up your camera. Got it? And then I want you to aim that camera on the very last QR code. And I'm going to do it with you because we have work to do. And right now, I want to ask you to make a donation directly to Yes on 4. And if you can donate $100, please donate $100. If you can donate $200, make it $2. And if that's easy, make it $1,000. And if $1,000 is easy, please make it $5,000. And I want to tell you why. Because it's going to cost this campaign $70 million. And we know that because we won 2 campaigns like this, one in Ohio and one in Michigan. And that's what it costs. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it right now. Okay. Dang it. Ooh, it's not easy.
But that's great news that you can take those home with you, and you can always also do it at home.
Wait, I'm going to do it. I want to do it.
And urge your friends to also contribute, please.
I want to tell you also that we have so far raised $42,000 for our abortion stories. And that's not even including ticket sales that I don't know about yet tonight. Shit. Okay, we have one more storyteller.
Wait.
What? Wait, no, I'm not, but there is one other thing I want to talk about.
Okay.
And that is, there's not only money that we need to raise, but there are 4 action items on the back of your program. 1, Canvas with Men for Choice. 2, a virtual phone bank with RAC Florida. There's also goodie bags that are at the door, I think, and they are little packets of postcards for sending postcards to voters. And then also, there's a QR code on your program that will enable you to go to Writing Class Radio's website and listen to our podcast and sign up for classes. Also, please join us. Don't leave yet. We have one more storyteller, but join us for the after party where you will meet a bunch of our sponsors and have a drink and have some food. Thank you to Cloud9 and Joanna's Marketplace.
Yeah.
For providing food.
And I would like to ask a favor also. This doesn't require any money. That's how we differ. I want you to ask 3 friends or inform 3 friends of what you have learned tonight. So things that you came in with, preconceived notions or any beliefs, maybe have a discussion, really try to learn from them and share what you know, the facts that you have learned tonight. Very, very important. Okay, that's it. Okay, up next is Nicole Walker, our final storyteller. She is an English professor at Northern Arizona University and the author of 8 books. That's damn impressive.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, her story tells us everything we need to know about why she writes and why she wrote this story. Please welcome Nicole Walker. Her story is called My Abortion at 11 Wasn't a Choice, It Was My Life.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Allison and Andrea, for bringing us all together. It's been quite a moving week, a couple of days, and I'm grateful to you all, too, for your donations and for listening. On August, okay, hold on, maybe it's too low. Too low. That has never happened. All right, is that good?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. On August 18th, 2022, 2 months after the Dobbs decision came down from the Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade, I wrote an essay for the New York Times. I predict that my 17-year-old daughter will become a doctor, I wrote. She knows everything about the gut biome, dopamine, and herniated discs. She does not look away at times others might. Like when my mother unexpectedly texted me pictures of a cyst she had removed from the back of her head, sitting bloody in a specimen cup. That's exactly what I would do, my daughter said. You have to show people. I don't mind looking at such things, though I would like a little warning. But here, I offer no warning, except to say that if not for the existence of Roe versus Wade when I got pregnant, that conversation with my daughter would not have happened. My family and I would not have our lives together at all. This is my story, and I ask you not to look away. In 1982, when I was 10 years old, a 14-year-old boy molested me. He was supposed to be babysitting me and my younger sisters. After the twins went to sleep, the babysitter and I sat on the couch watching MASH. He started caressing my arm, then my neck. Then he took off my shirt and my pants, then his clothes. He lay on top of me and had intercourse with me. I had a vague idea of what was happening. I didn't really know how wrong the babysitter situation was. I was flattered by the attention, but also confused. Why me? What does this mean? Was he my boyfriend? Why did we have to keep it a secret? He continued to molest me for more than a year. I haven't always used the word molest. I felt too much guilt and complicity. I'm still prone to feeling both. I'm not sure if that's a product of the molestation or if it's just my personality or if the two can even be disentangled. When I was 11, he impregnated me. I use the active verb with me as a direct object intentionally. To get pregnant suggests he threw the baseball and I, knowing it was coming, caught it. I did not mean to catch anything, nor did I know how to avoid doing so. My mom, who was already worried that something was wrong with me, figured it out. "Are you pregnant?" she asked. How did she know? Maybe it was pure motherly intuition. In 1983, abortion was legal across the United States. I did not feel lucky to get an abortion. I felt like garbage. The babysitter did not have to go to the clinic. The babysitter was not shamed and shunned by our community. Most people didn't even know what he had done. Only my mom and I were subject to the shame of entering that special building for that special procedure. Although no one in the neighborhood or school talked to me about it, I could feel the electric gossip surge around me. The freedom to choose wasn't what I experienced in 1983. My abortion wasn't a choice. It was my life. If I had been forced to give birth, I wouldn't be texting my mom about the removal of her cyst. I wouldn't teach at Northern Arizona University. I wouldn't be working on a book about climate change. I wouldn't be married to my husband or have my 2 children. I would be a prisoner subject to a body's whims, and not my body's whims, but the whims of a teenage boy who, as best as I can tell, experienced no consequences. When Roe versus Wade was overturned, I felt the prison gates fall around me, around my daughter. Pregnancy and childbirth changed life trajectories. How could someone decide what direction my life, these kids' lives, should go? I was so angry, I was so disempowered, and I felt like I'd been relegated to a second-tier citizen. How could my daughter or her friends believe they had powerful voices when they had no voice about what to do with their own bodies? So I came out with my story in the New York Times. Whatever shame I had held onto from that experience dropped away the moment I wrote my story. When I published the article, I was sure to get hate mail, but I didn't. I got words of support. "The strength of your truth is palpable. Your imagery makes a hot-button topic real and personal," Kathy wrote. "This is brave. This is magic. You are a badass," wrote Liz. "Thank you for opening up to the world, for sharing the grief and pain and social opprobrium that are visited on young women for their decisions they make. And thank you for giving a personal account of how the Supreme Court has violated our trust," wrote Josh. The connections that I made transformed my relationship with what had happened to me. All the shame I'd felt for having been sullied, duped, and ostracized disappeared. The word abortion didn't signal spoilage or scum. Because I could shape my story on my own terms, whatever detritus that had attached to me from the molestation or from the abortion fell away. It was my story to tell, and telling it to 1 million readers was the most empowering moment of my life. I cannot predict what my life would have been like if I had been forced to give birth when I was 11 years old, but I don't think it would have been as various or as surprising. A few months after Roe was overturned, I was invited to speak at the College of the Holy Cross about my books. The audience was composed mainly of undergraduates, and Catholic undergraduates at that. They only wanted to talk about the New York Times piece. They didn't ask why I wrote the article. They asked if I was okay after I'd published it. They asked what the response had been. They asked what was the hardest part telling about the abortion. I said, the hardest part is that everyone expects it to be hard. A local reporter interviewed me and asked if I had a photo of myself at 11. For the first time since I wrote the article, I broke down. It's one thing to tell the story of a girl at 11 who went through these things, but to look at her photo of a girl at 11 and to see her alone and scared, so on the verge of something so life-defining. Or worse, a month younger, having no idea what was coming. I think, what if she'd been forced to continue that pregnancy what would the next year's photo look like? I wouldn't have been able to recognize that girl. Now, I can look at the 12-year-old girl's photo and know that she's been through a lot, that with time and love and community, she could be here on this stage with you.
I'd like to say something. Thank you for coming out and supporting us in this very hard topic that, all of us went through. Thank you for supporting, and thank you for being here and listening. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.